Hello, very, very good evening to you, and two very old friends in the studio this evening. I'm sorry about the old, but it's true, it really is. We've got somebody here that I've known since 1979, I think, and somebody that I've known since 1989. I think that's right, Carlton, isn't it?
About that, yeah.
About 1989 when you joined Sheffield Wednesday from West Bromwich Albion.
Yeah.
Peter Slater, goodness knows.
I think it's before 79, to be fair, Alan.
Was it?
Well, I don't know.
Mid to late
I started
70s.
in radio in 1976, so it wouldn't have been long after that when I was working on a station in Newcastle called Metro Radio, and you were working for Radio Hallam.
I was indeed.
Yeah.
I was indeed. Well, let's make the introductions. I'm sure everybody knows anyway, but Peter Slater is, I think on Twitter I described you as an esteemed broadcaster. So, you know, you owe me probably more pints than I owe Carlton Palmer later on for that. But for many, many years, BBC Radio, well, going back to Radio 2 days even, and Radio 5 Live and Final Score, and now also works for BBC Local Radio, and we'll talk about Rotherham United because they're one of the clubs that you cover. Carlton Palmer, no introduction whatsoever. It's great to see you again. Look, we can't, and it's a very serious subject, we can't thank the coronavirus for anything, obviously, but that's the reason actually you're in this studio this evening in a roundabout way.
Yeah, well, we live in Shanghai, and I've done for the last 6 years. So obviously it's a serious and it's sad. You know, a lot of people have lost their lives. The extent I'm not quite sure of. I think it's about 575 people and still rising at the moment. So it's very sad. But we actually had left Shanghai before the virus had broke in a city called Hubei, which is about 2 hours from Shanghai. The Chinese New Year had started. So Lucy and I were on holiday in the Maldives. And we just felt that when it did break, that it was going to last some time. So, I mean, we're here, unfortunately, under those circumstances, but I'm not going to lie, it is good to be in the UK around, you know, the family, the grandkids, and getting to meet up with some friends. So we're taking advantage of the unfortunate situation to spend a bit of time in the UK.
Which is beyond your control or anybody's really, because the academy that you work for, the school, well, it's a school academy, isn't it, that you work for is what, closed until further notice?
Yeah, now all schools in Shanghai cannot open now until the 1st of March. I think there's 60 airlines have cancelled flights into mainland China at the moment. Right. There's no travel ban to go into China as it stands now. But I have to say one thing though, because obviously Lucy and I have lived in Shanghai for 6 years, and again over this coronavirus, China gets a lot of bad press, and anybody who's ever visited Shanghai, it is a wonderful place. It's not this place that's full of smog and as it is. I run every day in Shanghai, and it's the way that the media and the press have portray Shanghai sometimes, or China in itself, is not particularly in a good light. And obviously this disaster is not very good. Yeah. But if anybody ever gets a chance to go and visit Shanghai, it's a wonderful place. It's a big city, 23 million people.
Yeah, well, my daughter's visited and visited you while she was there as well.
Yeah, and people are pleasantly surprised when they go there because of the way the media generally portray it in the UK. It's not like that at all. Really isn't.
Typecast Shanghai, and you know what it's like to be typecast, don't you? You know that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about a reputation there, and here we are, however long after your playing career, and there are still some people out there bad-mouthing you for the fantastic fact that you played for England.
Yeah, but I mean, to be honest with you, it's like when people say, right, listen, there's people's perception. And the media have a big part to play in that because they develop people's perception. The one thing you can't argue with is fact, right? You can't argue with facts, right? So you can't play as many games as I've played and as many years as I've played for England, under 21s, England B, and then the national team, and played for top clubs, gone for a lot of money in transfer fees. There's no arguing over the facts. But if people want to do that and that's their perception...
Peter Slater, you answer for the media here, because you were very much the media during Carlton's career, a lot of it at Sheffield Wednesday.
No, I think he's absolutely right, and I think you're right that people did badmouth him for some particular reason. I mean, he was very much a good box-to-box player. He wouldn't have won that number of England caps and wouldn't have been... I mean, I have two distinct memories of Carlton, one of which I'll come to later, but I remember the FA Cup semi-final replay when Wednesday played Arsenal at Wembley. It was on a Thursday. Carlton couldn't remember if it was on a Thursday, but it was definitely on a Thursday. And Carlton Palmer was the captain of Sheffield Wednesday in their finest moment when they were in the FA Cup final replay against Arsenal. The other memory, well, you were actually there, and this is a completely off-the-wall thing. The Saturday after the first game, the club had a bit of a dinner for various people, and we were invited. And Paul Carrick, very well known in these parts, an excellent musician, put a band together. And he initially said, well, first of all, I'm going to introduce two good friends of mine, Chris Tifford and Glenn Tilbrook from Squeeze, who came on. And then he said, another friend of mine's just come up from South Wales, where he's been working with Eric Clapton. And that was a guy called Andy Fairweather-Lowe. Younger viewers and listeners won't remember him, but he was with a band called Amen Corner. Very, very popular guitarist. And then he said, the manager, Trevor Francis, has a friend who's come over from Los Angeles to watch the game. So will you please welcome Jeff Lynne? Right. So you had Jeff Lynne, Andy Fairweather-Lowe, Tifford and Tilbrook and Paul Carrick. And my one lasting memory is of a version of I Saw Her Standing There, the classic Beatles song, with guest vocals from Mr. C. Palmer and Mr. J. Sheridan. And it's an image I will never forget.
Hey, look, he has. I bet John Sheridan's forgotten it. Have you forgotten it?
No. Yeah. We had a good night.
Jeff Lynne, from your part of the world.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
No.
ELO.
Yeah, still going, Jeff.
Still going.
Yeah, but that's one thing I do remember. So, so maybe his football was better than his singing.
Hopefully.
That is for sure.
Hopefully. Well, look, while you're over in this country, we'll give you an opportunity to, get closer to one of your former clubs that we're particularly talking about here. I know that you follow them avidly anyway, wherever you are in the world. Are you looking forward to getting to see the Owls?
Yeah, I am. Listen, whenever I get back, my first call is to go and watch Sheffield Wednesday. But I'll be honest with you, I mean, like I was around this weekend and the game was Millwall, and I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't go, because I just didn't fancy it. And from all accounts, it was a dour game.
I think I went, but I can't remember anything about it.
Exactly.
It was a very dour game.
Exactly.
It really was. I mean, slightly better than the previous home game, which was a 5-0 defeat to Blackburn.
The last couple of months, they just dropped off. They were in a great position, weren't they? And I was thinking at one point, not just the playoffs, I thought they might be able to push for an automatic. But they just dropped off in the last...
You're looking from further afield than us. What do you think the problem is, or is it just a massive rebuilding job that's required there?
Well, I don't really know, and it's very difficult to give an opinion unless you know exactly what's going on within the club. But it's been going on for some years. I don't think that there can be any argument, because what I'm hearing is the wage bill is bigger than Sheffield United's, right?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised.
So for me, I've played in that division and I've got out that division, and there's only two ways to get out of that division. You get out of it because you bring in players that are better than the Championship, like what Wolves have done, right? Or you do what Burnley have done and what Chris Wilder has done at Sheffield United. Bring in young, fit, hungry, strong, 6 foot, strapping lads who can play 30 games a season. You look at Sean Dyche at Burnley. I think in the year they got promoted, remember they got promoted, relegated and promoted again. Most of their players played about 25, 30 games, maybe more in the season. They won most of their games around about the last 10 minutes. Sheffield United did similar. And if you look at the transition, like when we got promoted from the Championship at Sheffield Wednesday. I think we finished 4th the following year in the Premier League, right? Because we had better players.
The team virtually unchanged throughout your promotion season. Very little change.
And Sheffield United have been similar.
Yes.
I mean, Chris has added a few players to the squad.
But you picked yourselves as players. Chris Wilder's players at Sheffield United have picked themselves. The Sheffield Wednesday players have not picked themselves.
Yeah.
Have they really?
No, they haven't. I mean, you wouldn't know.
Not many of them have.
Yeah, you wouldn't know what was their best starting line. And I mean, maybe. I mean, I don't know. The criticism can't be at the chairman because he's put his money where his mouth is. But my argument is if you've got and don't get me, because I'm not interested in director of football or whatever, but I know Howard Wilkinson lives down the road. He goes there every weekend. Sure, what he doesn't know about football isn't worth knowing. So surely, the chairman or the board would speak to somebody like Howard to direct them in a way that could help them get out the league, because you can spend money on players, you can spend big money on players in terms of wages, but if they're not the right players, you've got two problems. A, you're lumbered with them because nobody else will take them, right? And it lasts for 3 or 4 years.
And that is the case at the moment.
Well, it's been there, but it's been the case for a while.
Yeah. I mean, any readers to my column will know that I argue constantly that a restructuring of the way the football side is managed and more football expertise driving it is the model to go for, really.
Well, it's difficult.
What do you think, Pete?
Well, there are so many different elements to this. Firstly, the Sean Dyche thing and Chris Wilder. If you're picking the same team week in, week out, that really builds team spirit. And a team spirit, if the sum of the whole is greater than the particular parts of the team, then I think you always have a better chance. I think with Sheffield Wednesday as well, I have to say it, poor managerial appointments. And if you look at the way they've chopped and changed over recent years, and you watch Sheffield Wednesday far more than I do, Alan, but since the team that Carlton played in, there's not really been that oomph about going to Sheffield Wednesday. I go so many times, and it's just disappointing.
Yeah.
And yet there is so much potential there. It's not going to take an awful lot to really get it all going.
I don't know about Carlos Carvalho did well.
Well, Carlos did well.
In fairness to Dave Ponchansiri, two playoffs. Steve Bruce was a great appointment.
Absolutely, I think Steve,
it's only Jos Lukai that you can.
Well, I think it was Jos I was questioning, and Steve Bruce was a very, very good appointment. Now, I come from the northeast. I've known Steve, like you probably have, for donkey's years, and he would have stayed at Sheffield Wednesday. The only job that would have taken Steve Bruce away from Sheffield Wednesday was the job that he'd always wanted, which was the Newcastle job. And you can understand why he always wanted the Newcastle job, because he's a Geordie, because it's kind of in his blood. I think he was offered it once in the past and couldn't do it or turned it down. He wasn't going to turn it down again. And I know that Sheffield Wednesday supporters really resent Steve Bruce for what he did, but I can understand exactly why he went to Newcastle.
Yeah, and I think we've moved on from that. But Gary Monk is somebody that Carlton, I must say, I'm personally impressed with him.
Yeah.
I think he's calm, measured. I think he's clear-sighted. But you know him better.
Yeah,
he was a young player at Southampton when you were there.
Yeah, he was. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because he was young at the time when I was there, so I can't really speak about him as a character. I think what he's done in his managerial career so far, he's done well. I don't see what I will not know, and you will not know. And I've been a manager at 2 clubs. There's always a side.
Well, I'm very sorry about that. If I could explain to you what happened there, I would do. But I can only use those 2 words, technical hitch, for why we disappeared for a few minutes. I'm sure it's something to do with these two. Welcome back.
I blame Steve Bruce.
We were talking about Steve Bruce. I'm really sorry for the break in transmission, but you were saying about... Well, we talked about Steve Bruce. We were talking about Gary Monk and his qualities as a man and a manager.
So, I mean, like, he's got to be given time, hasn't he, before you can give him an assessment, because we don't know what the situation is behind the scenes. The one thing that is clear, there is a lot of players there on big money who are not performing. That is for sure.
Yeah.
So, and they're not performing week in, week out. And that seems to be the recurring theme for the last 3 or 4 years. Players are not playing like, you know, Fletcher doesn't play, you know, he leads the line well, he's a very good player. But how many games does he play a season? The boy Hutchinson, how many games? Well, you look at the side that I played in, Pearson, Shirtcliffe, Viv Anderson, Danny Wilson, John Sheridan, Carlton Palmer. We all played, Mark Bright, 35 games, 36 games a season.
Yeah.
You know, you look at Chris Wilder, I don't think he's made too many changes, even in the Premier League this season.
So why is that though, Carlton? Because were you fitter in those days, or what are they, is it just a mental thing that they don't want to play now?
Well, if you take Sheffield United, for instance, right, the one thing that they are fit, they are very fit. Chris has got them very fit, and that's why they are doing as well as what they're doing, because they have a system that they know how to play. They are organised. They know what they're doing, and they're fit. Right. The one thing that has impressed me probably more from the opening day of the season is their ball retention, which has to improve in the Premier League, and it has tenfold. They've done really well because you have to retain the ball. Well, I look at Sheffield Wednesday, and the one thing I've always said is they don't look fit to me, and that must be apparent because the players don't play enough games.
The other thing, Gary Monk has brought this out into the open, but it's been a perception that a lot of us looking in have had for a long time. Too comfortable. Dressing room too comfortable. I'll get you on that in a minute, Carlton. Peter, what's your observation on that?
It's a problem right the way through. I mean, Carlton has been a manager. The problem for managers now is managing multimillionaires, managing players who have such a high standard of living that if they get a rollicking in the dressing room, so what? Doesn't really matter so much. And that would never have happened. For example, when you and I started in our line of business, if you didn't play, you were out of the side and you really suffered for that. And I think absolutely Carlton's phrase is right. There are dressing rooms where there are players who are too comfortable, who are on very good contracts and are just seeing out their time.
Carlton?
Well, I mean, I played in a dressing room where there were quite a few wealthy people. Woodsy came from Rangers, Des Walker, Chris Waddle, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
You know, we were all very comfortable in life, but John Sheridan, but we were driven to play. All I can do is compare it to the boys at Bramall Lane. The boys at Bramall Lane must be on £750 to £1 million a year, and they don't look comfortable to me. The one thing that Chris never praises them for is hard work. That's a given. And they all seem to have that team spirit together, right? I mean, you see them now when they're on a break or whatever. I see them when they go to Dubai. I see them on Twitter. There's about 7 or 8 of them together. So they seem to have that team spirit. Now, I did notice a while ago, and this was even before the present chairman, when Dave Jones was manager at Sheffield Wednesday, the one thing I didn't like where players in that dressing room were changing in different areas. It didn't seem to be that togetherness. And you can't, in a team sport, if you haven't got that togetherness and everybody's in it together, and also you need a few characters. In the Sheffield United, like the 3 centre-halves look a bit handy to me, and I think they get about a few people. I'm not so sure how many people in there. I see Barry Banyan, who I think is arguably been Wednesday's best player for the last 3 seasons or so, right? And he has a go at people, but I don't see too many people digging other people out.
Well, you would have had that in your team.
6 seconds to the break. I'm sorry to have another break after that technical history. We will be back in 5 for 24 minutes. See you then.